You've entered the fuck pit with America's hungiest podcast, The Pod People. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and my family's always been in wheat.
I'm Ben Sheets, and today I have a lot to chew on.
And I was not ready for that intro. I was not
You
prepared.
ever are.
Honestly, though. Anyway, hello. I'm Cleveland Mosier, and it's nice to lobotomate you.
Well, it's that time of year again. We are halfway through 2021, as hard as it is to believe.
No, you did get it because it was a double pun, because it's lobota
Yeah,
and also meat.
No, I got it.
But meat's important, too.
Yep. No.
Yeah, it's two puns for the price of one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I just had to interrupt you just to get
Thank
that
you
in
for
there. It was really
interrupting me
important.
to clarify
Yeah.
your double pun.
Yeah.
Your double pantandra.
It's important for the listeners. Anyway, yeah, carry on.
Well, we've made it halfway through 2021, even though it still feels like we're in 2020 in a lot of ways. And it's time for our mid-year catch-up. This year, I am in the lead with predictions, so I have curated this episode. We're going to be talking about two films this evening, and two films that make an interesting double billing, I think, sort of unintentionally, because we've got two films that are both cannibal horror films and also are heavily 70s inspired. I think both of these films are. Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking about Death Ranch and Honeydew. And let's just go ahead and get right into the first of those, which is Death Ranch, which is written and directed by Charlie Steeds, and it stars DeAndre Teagle, Faith Monique, Travis Kuttner, and Scott Skurlock. And Death Ranch is sort of a modern-day blaxploitation film about...
But not all modern day, because it's set in the 70s.
Yes, but it is a blaxploitation film in style and spirit.
And period.
And period, yep. It's about a young black man who has just escaped from prison, and his older brother and sister are hiding him out on their family's old ranch in sort of the Tennessee Hill Country. But what they don't know is that the ranch has become the hunting ground for the Ku Klux Klan, but not just the regular Ku Klux Klan.
Ku Klux Cannibals.
Yeah. So they soon find themselves hunted by Klansmen who want to eat them and also fuck them.
But soon, the hunters very quickly become the hunted.
Yes, indeed.
And it rules.
Yeah, this is a short and sweet 77-minute film, and it is 70s in every sense of the word. In fact, if I were to put this on and not know that it came out in 2021, I would almost guess that it was straight out of the 70s.
I think one factor that might clue you in to it being a modern-made film would be the score. Now, the score is very 70s influenced, like, don't get me wrong, and there are many tracks that do feel right out of the 70s. It does a fantastic job of that. But it also likes to sprinkle in, like, some modern electronic packages, you know, like you get the crazy, like, disaster-y kind of sounds and such, like, scattered throughout as well, which I thought added a little extra zhuzh and impact to the soundtrack. And
I felt like the soundtrack felt pretty authentic to a lot of those 70s exploitation movies, including corny synth stuff and stuff like that. In fact, I think this is, like, one of the best cases of blaxploitation revivalism that we've gotten.
Yeah.
You know, like, we've gotten that in, like, Black Dynamite, for example. But Black Dynamite is much more tongue-in-cheek in a lot of ways.
It's sort of parodying blaxploitation.
Where this feels like more of a straight
return to
kind
form.
of revivalism.
Yeah.
And for that, I think it works. And a lot of the shortcomings I think this film has, especially in acting and budget, work for me because it fits that kind of blaxploitation, low budget ethos.
I was thinking the same thing.
Absolutely agree. Like, I think if you're not as familiar with the genre, it might throw you off at first, like the sort of stilted acting at times. But I felt it was by design. I felt like it was them like trying to do like kind of like poor like low budget acting of the era.
Whether
like,
or not
I
it was by
impressed.
design, it definitely fits the tone of the film. That being said, like, I do still think that in a lot of ways those things are, at least for me, still kind of shortcomings. It is kind of hard to care about the characters when the acting is so bad. Not to say that this is really a character-driven film by any means, but there's definitely some, I think, kind of exhausting dialogue sequences that I wished were either shorter or just absent.
Yeah, like
Sure,
partway
well-
into the first act, it was I think the most like egregious or grievous, I guess, not even that bad. There's one scene with the brother and the sister. This come after like two other like dialogue sequences that goes on for a good while, where they're talking about, you know, why he was off in prison and family, whatnot, and
The older
it
brother
goes
is
on for a good
particularly-
few minutes.
The older brother is particularly bad, I think.
But I found him to be like charmingly bad. The sister really won me over by the end of the film, but earlier on, like,
because she
her-
gets a taste of the action later, unlike
Yes.
the older brother who is the first to be killed off.
and she's great for it too.
She gets some redemption, which is nice.
You have a really good point about kind of the shortcomings of the first section of the movie when they're introducing the characters and kind of setting up these connections, because the characters are shallow caricatures in this film, and that's what you want from a film like this.
Sure.
And so to give it too much time kind of drags it on a little bit.
It's
Agreed.
weird though because it's already such a short movie. You know, it's not even a full hour and 20 minutes. So it's weird that a movie that short does feel like it kind of drags in the first act.
I feel like possibly a little bit of action or just some occurrence between like those like multiple dialogue scenes in a row like could have been
Yeah.
nice, because there's just one transition of dialogue to the next for a good while after, you know, the opening credits.
I'm surprised they didn't intercut that first lady who got kidnapped by the Klan in to kind of break that up a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to jump to the action a little bit sooner in this movie because that's where this film really shines.
Man, you know, like like an additional sequence of her being kidnapped between some of those dialogue scenes would have really done it. I
Yeah.
think like that would have ramped things up a little bit. It would have kept
It
us
would
on
have
our
created
seats.
some tension because like I
Yeah.
think that the first act is pretty heavily devoid of tension. Like there's a little bit of character tension between the older and younger brother, but it's not particularly interesting because especially the older brother is not a very good actor. So like it doesn't feel tense to me. It's just like they're reading lines that are supposed to create tension, but doing so kind of flatly. So I think that if they had intercut that with the other woman getting kidnapped or seeing some of the Klan stuff sooner, then I think that would have helped pick up the pace a little bit.
Well, because once the Klan stuff gets going, the movie really picks up and
Yes.
it becomes very fun.
Yeah.
Extremely fun. And I mentioned this while we were watching the movie, but like Klansmen are like perfect exploitation villains because A, like instantly hateable
Yeah.
characters, and B, like they're all in white full outfits, so you can hide cheap prosthetics under them and cheap gore, and the blood will show up on the white suits. It's just a no-brainer, obviously.
Primo.
It works so well.
It's true, yeah. Much like Nazis, Klansmen make perfect villains because you don't have to do any kind of development to make them hateable. They're detestable by the nature of their existence, so you don't have to worry about like building a villain. It's just like, oh, here's some Klansmen, and then on top of that, these ones are also cannibals. Why? Because Cousin Delmar says that black people have always been food for white people, I guess.
Yeah, why not? Why
Yeah,
not?
'cause why not?
Yeah.
Like, wanna make these villains even more villainous? Yeah, they also eat people. Sure, why not? I don't care.
Yeah, I thought that was fun. It was a fun extra element. It added to the camp factor a little bit.
Oh yeah, like the moment where one of the Klansmen is explaining that was as our protagonist is tied up, and another Klansman like comes into the barn door like holding a severed arm, and the guy like walks over and just like tastes some blood off the arm and is like, yeah, good job, Cletus.
Yeah, right. He didn't even...
Like what the?
It's like
Like, god damn, like just so many like little bits like that. I absolutely love seeing like Klansmen incompetency. It's just such a funny gimmick. You see it in Oh Brother Where Art Thou and also Django Unchained as well. Like I mean, Django Unchained I think is one of the best, like where you have Ride of the Valkyries like right afterwards, like
they do it in the new
they're all
Red
complaining
Dead
about
game,
their hoods.
yeah, that's right, in Red Dead 2.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, and you know, like it's kind of like a self-referential Ouroboros in this regard, but like I did see a lot of Tarantino references in this as well, which what I mean by the Ouroboros is that like Tarantino is referencing these kinds of blaxploitation
Yeah, it's funny
movies.
because like I'm sure Tarantino would love this movie.
I'm sure, yeah, if he hasn't seen it, like he definitely would. But they even do like the patented Tarantino trunk shot with the guns, except instead of the trunk, it's in like the barrel. But they put the camera down in there as they're pulling out the guns, and you know the same kind of deal with like using all of these like 70s funk pieces in the soundtrack and stuff like that. Now, I do think there is a pretty high competency gap in terms of filmmaking between this and Tarantino. Like, I wouldn't go so far as to say this is a Tarantino film.
Yeah. But I found a lot of like the poor framing and other like moments to be like really charming.
Oh yeah, well the cinematography is like straight out of the 70s and these kinds of exploitation films. Lots of handheld, a lot of like punch-ins and stuff. You know, very sort of frenetic editing, very utilitarian framing. It's never trying to be artsy at all. It's just set up the camera, do the shot, move on, you know?
And we'll talk about it a little more going on to the next one, but this was kind of the opposite of that movie in that this movie is completely unpretentious. This is very straightforward. It's
the opposite of Honeydew, is that what you're saying? Yeah, they're very polar in that sense.
And very unpretentious in what it's doing. And I kind of love it for that, because I feel like it's so easy to get bogged down in the artsiness of movies nowadays, and I kind of respect going in the opposite direction with that. And like even stuff that feels kind of haphazardly done in this movie feels authentic to the time and charming, like you said.
Totally.
Like I think about the scene where the Klansmen are chasing our main character through the woods.
Oh yeah.
And they're shot at night because they have torches and the torches will light them, but the main character doesn't have any light. So they were like, we're not going to be able to see this guy, so we'll just shoot it day for night. But it looks completely different.
Yeah,
There's two different
keep
scenes.
Cutting back and forth. It's like this is just very obviously two completely different times of day.
Yeah.
And locations.
And locations, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're both in the woods, so, you know, like, it could be the same place, but one of them is, like, really dark, lit only by torchlight, and then the other one is, like, very obviously shot at either, you know, at twilight, either dawn or dusk. Like, the sun is still up in some regard. And just, like, to cut so sharply back and forth between the two, it feels very amateuristic. I'm assuming it's by design, but it was kind of funny. It's like, this is just two different times of day.
But I find that charming. I think, like, again, that's very utilitarian in that, like, they probably had a limited shooting schedule and a limited budget, and they were like, how can we work around this?
Yeah, I bet this was a fun film to make. I imagine being on set would have been very enjoyable. Because, like you said, it's totally unpretentious. It's completely to the point, and also they got to do a lot of like really fun gore practical effects. There are a lot of squibs in this movie, a lot of really nice blood bursts when people get shot.
A lot of stabbings and impalements.
A lot of stabbings, yes. Oh, yeah, man. tons of shit like that. Stabbing with crowbar, with knife, with axe. It's a very penetrative film.
Yeah, a lot of just outright fatalities.
Yeah. I love the creativity of the gore in this film, though.
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy to go into something like this and just have kind of lazy gore and kill sequences. Oh, someone got stabbed. Oh, someone got shot. But this movie does not do that at all.
They're very creative with it, and it's got a high body count too. It's like there are a few different times in the movie where just some additional Klansmen show up. It's like, okay, cool. So we have more people to kill in fun, creative ways.
Yeah, there's like no point do you need to ask why more Klansmen are only just showing up now. It's great. Like, awesome. More lambs for the slaughter. Love it.
Because one guy always escapes and runs off and gets some more people to come back, and then eventually another guy will run off and bring more people back, and it's like, okay, cool. I don't care. Like, I don't need to know who all these characters are. All the Klansmen have like very generic like white trash hillbilly names. They're all named like Cletus and Jeb and Joe Bob.
It's great. It's fucking great. No, the moment where the film won me over was when our protagonist stabs his attacker in the eye, and we get that incredible shot that's like gore cam from the perspective of the villain as this chair leg has been like stabbed through his face, so it's like sticking out the left side of the frame, and you can tell that the person behind the camera is just like throwing bits like out just underneath the camera, like at our main character, implying like there's like gore just like spraying out of this guy's face, and it is so funny. It is so fun to like just like tracking around. You're just hearing this like redneck screaming and just kind of like goofily like throwing it up underneath the camera.
That whole sequence rules. The movie actually won me over right before that, when our main character is tied up to the table and the racist uses a tiny lighter and sets it up under our main character's balls, but like really far under his balls.
It's like a Zippo lighter, and he sets it on a jar like under his balls, but it's like a foot and a half away from his balls. It's just like a tiny little lighter flame, but it keeps cutting back, and we see like smoke rising and like
blood dripping onto the
down
Zippo.
onto it. It's like you would not be able to feel the heat off of that, like even the heat from it at that distance. Like not even to speak of getting your fucking balls set on fire.
Hey, maybe he just has like really saggy grandpa balls.
Yeah, they hang real low.
Yeah. You never know.
A tube sock with some walnuts in it.
One of my favorite creative kills, like towards the end of the movie, is when one of the Klansmen like sticks his head through a hole that has been shot in the wall in between two boards, and I think the sister takes a crowbar and stabs through his head, so it gets stuck between the two boards, and the Klansmen on the other side pull him back, and it rips his head off.
Yeah, like very easily, his head just comes right off.
Oh yeah, with no effort whatsoever. Like
it's awesome.
I also love when one of the other, like the younger Klansmen, I think his character's name is Gator, because of course it is.
Yeah. Respect to the actor, like growing his sideburns out to get the 70s look for this little movie. Like.
The sister, like they've already pretty much maimed this dude at this point, and the sister like
very much maimed him.
Takes an axe to his balls and like pulls his balls out and like smushes them on his face. And it's very obvious that they're just hard-boiled eggs. You can see like the shell like crunching and everything.
That's my favorite part of the movie.
The white chunks and everything.
Yeah, it's like it's just obviously eggs.
Yeah.
And when they another one where they
the intestines.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, where they pull a dude's intestines out and feed it to him, and the intestines just look like rope dipped in marinara sauce. I'm like 90% sure.
It looks like a wet towel almost that they cut up.
Yeah, it's like it does not have the texture or like the feel of intestines at all. Like I'm 90% sure that it's rope dipped in pizza sauce.
And the texture is really fun too.
Yeah.
It's got kind of a weird look to it. And then he makes him eat his own guts.
Yeah, and we get some practical puke
Oh yeah, he barfs.
Yeah, that's fun.
That scene. Yeah, it's all...
There's a lot of fluids in this movie.
Yes.
And you love to see it, honestly.
Well,
and,
we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the fuck pit.
Yeah, well, that's the movie at its sleaziest, but
Yes.
I kind of appreciate that it avoided getting too sleazy. It gets nasty.
It gets really nasty, but it fortunately stops before the rape.
Yeah.
Because they do have like a rape dungeon that they call the fuck pit, and they have the sister tied up down there, and the brother like steals the robes and hood of one of the Klansmen that he's killed and puts it on and goes down into the fuck pit, and one of the guys who's like about to rape his sister is like being all nasty and stuff, and then the other guy's just like sitting in the corner like rubbing his hands together
Like a goblin.
like a goblin. But it's that part is so fucking nasty because he's got like this big tub of Vaseline,
and there's like pubes in it,
and it takes a long time like getting a big handful of it, and then spitting into it and like rubbing it around, and it's so disgusting and so nasty. But thankfully it's right at that moment that our hero reveals himself and blows their brains out.
I love the kind of reversal later on when instead of shooting him outright, he shoots the Vaseline, and it gets in his eyes.
Right.
Oh yeah,
and that's kind of a fun comeuppance from the earlier Vaseline scene.
Yeah, it's Chekhov's Vaseline.
There are a few moments in this film where, and again, like there's charm to it, but there are a few moments where our characters make like kind of oddly like unself-aware decisions in a scene. The key one is when they're in their car trying to escape and they don't really drive anywhere.
Oh yeah.
Or like do anything. They just get out of the car
I guess the
again.
car didn't start.
Is that what was supposed to be
I think
implied
that's
there?
what
Because
was
it's so
supposed to happen, but like it wasn't very clear.
no, because
in
it
the
sounds
editing.
like it's so loud. That scene is so loud, and there's so much music and shouting going on. Like I thought that I heard the car turn over, but I couldn't tell. And then it's like, yeah, then they turn on. Well, because after they try to turn on the car, they turn on the headlights, which is why I thought that the car started up. And the Klansmen are like in front of the car and they start like dumping gasoline on it. And we're all just sitting there like, run them over. Why aren't you running them over? Drive. And like they literally just let the Klansmen come around to the door and like open the doors and like drag them out. It's like, why didn't you use your car?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is like they didn't really have the budget for like anyone to get like hit by the car or whatever, I guess.
That takes no budget. That literally takes a
Yeah.
mannequin that you put a Klan hood on and throw some blood packs up under there.
Yeah.
Like there's like this movie is fine showing just hard boiled eggs as balls. Like I wouldn't have been
yeah,
upset.
and I
if
mean,
there'd been
I think of like
Well, there's also the possibility that the car was like, like owned by. So it is a really nice
But I
car.
think of like Trauma and like Toxic Avenger.
Yeah.
And when they have a scene where they just run over some dude's head and it's just a watermelon.
Yeah.
But you still get the crunch and the gore and stuff. They could have totally done that, but we get plenty of creative kills, so I don't mind it too much ultimately.
No.
Yeah, it moves on quickly enough.
It's fine.
What did y'all think of the like main Klansman villain, cousin Delmar? I thought he was okay.
I thought he was alright.
I wanted a little bit more from him. He gave me kind of like Michael Rooker vibes, but not as good as Michael Rooker.
Yeah, he had that hodunk kind of
Yeah.
vibe to him.
And he's, an older guy, bald with like a salt and pepper goatee. So I did think that was funny after he shows up that they have like a 5-minute shootout like across the aisle in the barn. Like they never do a wide shot to show us like how close together they actually are, but we've seen that space other times in the movie, and it's like the distance from me to you right now, Ben. And it's like it just keeps cutting back and forth.
Yeah, it's like 5 feet.
Yeah, and that sequence goes on for multiple minutes of like our heroes in the stable shooting like through the boards, and then like the Klansmen on the other side. It's like, yeah, they're like 5 feet apart, and they're shooting at each other for like 3 to 5 minutes without anybody getting hit. I wonder if that was supposed to, like, intentionally.
Well, I think one of the Klansmen gets hit.
Yeah, he does, but it takes much longer than it should.
Yeah,
and like
yeah,
the
definitely.
other one who doesn't get hit is not even like ducking down to reload the shotgun. He's just standing up and like leaning over the stable like the whole time. He would have been easily shot.
Oh, yeah. I love the punch-ins. They have a ton of punch-ins in this movie, and they made me laugh every time.
As I would expect in a movie like this.
Yeah.
Oh, and the slowdowns, like all of the
Oh, yeah, the artificial slow-mo.
yeah, where like the frame rate just drops to null. Like
That's-
that shit's funny every time.
That's the only other thing that I think is maybe indicative of this film not actually being a 70s film is I suspect it might have been shot on digital. This is the kind of film that I would absolutely want to be shot on film.
I believe you're right. I believe it was shot on digital.
The
I wouldn't be
grain,
surprised.
the grain looked artificial.
Yeah.
They slapped a little bit of 70s grain on it.
It's
and,
well
like,
enough hidden. Like it's not over baked. Like I would take it as like possibly digital as opposed to like definitely like digital with a shitty like 70s filter.
Well, also like
there was one, but it was
slow-
like well enough hidden.
the slow-mo sequences feel like when you slow down digital rather than when you slow down film.
And
It's hard to say for sure.
The thing is, like, I get it. You know,
Film's
again,
expensive,
utilitarian, like low budget filmmaking. You want to get coverage as much as possible, but I do kind of wish it was shot.
I
on
mean, if
film.
you're making a 70s blaxploitation
kinda wish
film,
it,
like
yeah.
I think you're making a big mistake to not
At least like
If you can afford it,
transfer
yeah.
to digital.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously it was shot on a low budget, but like
Very. Yeah.
you put that budget towards celluloid as far as I'm concerned. But, you know, c'est la vie. It's fine. Do you guys have any other big points on this one, or are we ready to rate?
No, kills fun, soundtrack good. I love the opening theme. They actually, like got a singer for it and did it proper, like all the old school, like Shaft, themes and Superfly and all that. Like I really appreciated it.
I loved the one-liners.
The costumes
that
are great.
characters get.
Oh yeah. Missed opportunity. They referenced Disney World at the beginning, and when the brother's dying, I was really expecting him to say like, hey, "We're never gonna get to Disney World."
Looks like I'm never gonna make it to Disney World.
Yeah, like I was expecting that. But no, it doesn't really pay off. But again, that's not even a gripe. Loved it.
Why don't you slap a rating on there, Cleveland?
Oh, strong 4, maybe more. Just the first act. It's a little slow, and there were like 3 dialogue scenes that run a little over long, all next to each other. But man, yeah, what a hoot! Oh, I was laughing so much during that movie. God.
What about you, Ben?
Yeah, this is an easy 4 out of 5 for me as well. I think it's very charming, and they do a lot with the small budget that they have. And like the shortcomings it has feels authentic to a blaxploitation and an exploitation revivalism movie. I think if you kind of like those kind of movies, definitely check this out because you'll have a blast. And if you like trauma movies even, check this out because you'll have a blast.
I'm not normally one for just having an absolute ball at gore movies. I've actually been a little gored out lately after like all the Saw movies. After watching, some
You
of
only
those
watched
again.
3 of them.
That's
Yeah.
enough, dude. That's enough for me, dude. Anyway, like I've been a little over it, and this film won me over regardless, largely because of like how like cheap but fun and comedic they are. Even if you might not be like the biggest gore person, you're probably still gonna have a pretty good laugh at this gore. It's funny. It's funny as shit.
Yeah, it's cartoonish.
Yeah.
I have few disagreements. I think I'm slightly less hot on this. Just because for a film that's only 77 minutes, like it should zip along from the get-go. And for 77 minutes, it feels more like 90 minutes because of the slow first act and the kind of flat boring acting, but like once it hits its stride, it's a blast, and I very much appreciate that this film exists, and it's nice to see a film that pays so much attention to detail in like sort of revitalizing or reviving rather a genre from like 50 years ago. So I'm going to give it a solid 3.5 out of 5. And that will give Death Ranch a average of 3.8 out of 5. And now, moving on to our next film. Again, I did not intend to do 2 cannibal flicks. It just kind of happened like that. It feels especially appropriate considering that like I love cannibal films and noted as saying such on the podcast. But this next one is the brand new film Honeydew, which is written and directed by Devereaux Milburn, are also another writer-director on this movie, just like the last one. And it stars Barbara Kingsley, Jamie Bradley, Malin Barr, and Sawyer Spielberg, who I did not realize until the film was almost over when Ben pointed out is Steven Spielberg's son.
Son of Spielberg.
Nepotism, baby.
Yeah. I think he has directed and produced a few other things, but I think this is his first like real acting gig, because the trailer says introducing Sawyer Spielberg.
I mean, I will say in respect to nepotism, as roles to snag if like you're the son of Steven Spielberg go, I wouldn't necessarily see this as one of those. Like this is a fairly small
he's
art house.
playing an actor as an actor, and that's kind of self-indulgent in itself.
I mean, like financially though, like
also
indulgent, like a relevant pick, sure. But
well, I was looking at it, and he's also been in like The Post, which is a recent Spielberg movie, and a few other Spielbergs.
Sure.
Well, at least this one is not a Spielberg vehicle. Steven Spielberg's name is nowhere on this, so even if he is an executive producer or something, he's keeping his name off of it.
I wouldn't have expected to either. This is not anything like a Steven Spielberg film.
I don't think it is. It doesn't feel like that at all. No. But I did think that similarly to Death Ranch, this movie gave me lots of like 70s filmmaking vibes. The opposite end of the spectrum. It's not an exploitation film, but it does feel a lot like a sort of contemplative, slow burn, dread heavy 70s film.
I mean, aesthetically it has similarities. I feel like it's almost a deconstruction of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Hills Have Eyes, the original.
It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre Retirement Edition. And that rules. I say that with love, but it really, yeah, I think feels like the retirement home version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It's much slower. It's very slow. I would say that this movie crawls. I don't personally mind that because I found it so atmospheric and unsettling.
Yeah, instead of crawl, let's say wallow.
No, I think it crawls. I think it crawls. I think this movie is way too slow.
I think it crawls through filth.
I probably have a different opinion on this movie than you guys. But I thought this movie it felt very pretentious Williamsburg type of like film school senior with money movie. And when it works, it works. Don't get me wrong. But like, it doesn't really earn the sense of artsiness that it kind of tries to convey.
I see where you're coming from. I don't wholly agree. I liked this movie a lot. I get the kind of like film schoolish vibes that you did. And I think this is one of the first, if not the first, films by this director. It does kind of have that vibe, but honestly, like, it does like atmosphere and discomfort so well that I did not mind the slow pace. Like, I really enjoyed sitting in it. Well, enjoy is maybe the wrong word. I found most of this film like a very uncomfortable watch.
You found it effective.
It's funny because to me it bounced between intense dread and almost absurdist comedy. Like, I found a lot of
At times.
sequences in this movie very funny.
I found myself laughing a few times too, but
I think it was like
it felt more like nervous laughter for me.
yeah, I got the same kind of like off-putting, like near comedic feelings watching Midsummer. Like the bear suit, the bear suit is comedic out of context, but in context it's horrifying. And this film is largely the same. Like when we don't have the context behind like why these people are staring or shaking, like it's funny, but the revelation is horrifying. And when it comes to like the style, I will say it is with justification. Like it does have to do with like the what would you call it? What's the disease? The
Sortico, I
Sortico,
think?
yeah. Like when it comes to like the Sortico having an effect on everything and everyone, like there is like a psychedelic element to that, and so it works. Like it is all done by design.
I wasn't really in love with the hallucinogenic sort of editing of this movie, to be honest. I think it kind of made the film feel more pretentious than sometimes it actually was, even. Just because, like, from the get-go, you're jumping, really emphasizing, oh, this is an artsy film. And, like, it definitely feels Ari Aster-esque at times, but like I don't think it has the craftsmanship or artifice that like Ari Aster brings.
Well, the problem is, I think
it doesn't feel as compelling with its character.
I don't think it's quite the same level, but I think that it's trying to do enough of its own thing. Like I don't think that you're ever supposed to, at least the vibe I got is like I don't think you're ever supposed to really connect with any of these characters. There's like an extreme distance to everybody that I think really sets the tone of like how uncomfortable everything in this movie is. Like there's not even from the get-go is there like a sense of like the normal that is then corrupted over the course of the film. Like it feels wrong from the very beginning, and I think that's kind of unlike Ari Aster, where like there's always a sense of wrongness in his stuff, but there's also a point of connection with the characters that I don't think you get in this one, which is fine. I wasn't necessarily looking for it. I don't think any of the characters are particularly likable. Like our protagonists, Sam and Riley, are pretty shitty to each other.
Well, it's funny. When it comes to the editing, I was pretty exhausted by it at the beginning. I was eventually, I think I kind of like fell into the lull of it. But it is very ADD.
Yes.
And that's what's so interesting about it is like the film is slow, but the cuts are short, and often like any singular like piece of music only lasts, for like the span of like a single verse or chorus. Like we get very little tracks that last for an extended period of time. The title is really gratifying in this movie because it's finally like just sitting on a shot and like one piece of music. It's just constantly shifting and flitting back and forth, and I was thinking that was by the end of the film going to play into some sort of like collective consciousness theme or something, but I didn't really ever get a payoff with that. All that just to say, like, it made it really hard to track, and there wasn't a lot going on, but it's very busy and distracting. Like it's constantly hopping from one idea to the next.
In the beginning it is, but I think once they get into the house, there are lots of like very prolonged takes of somebody just like sitting at the table and just like staring.
Yes,
but
once we get to the house.
Is right,
but there's a lot of time before we get to the house.
The of the soundtrack.
Yeah,
and I think
for sure.
This film is definitely elevated by its soundtrack.
The score is incredible.
It is.
It's fan-fucking-tastic.
Strange and off kilter and kind of quirky, but not in like an obnoxious way necessarily.
No, in an unsettling way. It's like a lot of it is like there's some cool like sort of almost like Twilight Zone like theremin kind of synthy stuff, but most of the score is like human vocalizations that are used in like really weird ways. Like the percussion sounds like when you like flick your cheek, like like that kind
Yeah,
of
it's
shit.
a lot of mouth sounds.
Mouth sounds, and there are parts where like the percussion is like whispering and just like making sort of like wordless vocalizations, whistling,
And a squeaky trumpet.
and it's relentless. It's through the whole fucking movie, and I agree with you that I think it does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yes, I think without it, this movie would be even slower, and I hesitate to say more insufferable, but like the soundtrack definitely carries it and elevates it to be much more interesting than I think it would be otherwise.
Visually, I really loved it. I loved the palette of this movie.
That felt very 70s to me too.
Yeah,
lots of yellows and oranges and earth tones.
Yeah, and the blues. Like, I love how TV screens and like TV light is used in this movie.
There's some weird stuff on the TVs in this
Yeah,
movie.
they show a lot of Popeye and Betty Boop, and then there's that weird, like, sing-along public access.
Yeah,
it's like public access.
Like
yeah.
Chuck Sing Us the Oldies or something like that. It feels like a Tim and Eric bit.
Yeah.
Almost.
Did you guys ever watch Tim and Eric's Bedtime Stories? It was their horror series that they did, with kind of an absurdist tinge. And, like, that felt very Tim and Eric Bedtime Stories right there.
I liked that stuff in this a lot.
Me
though.
too.
Like you used the word absurdist earlier, and I think that's a good word to describe a lot of this movie. And I think that it is laughable at times because of that. Whether it feels like it's genuinely funny or like holding you hostage kind of funny, I think depends on the viewer. But it's a super surreal movie.
One of my favorite moments that encapsulates that is after a moment of dramatic tension upstairs, we cut back downstairs to the television, and there's an American flag waving, and there is this rendition of "Oh Say Can You See" that is like really fucked, and it's fucked in a
It's like
particular
blown
way.
out.
Yeah,
Almost.
it's blown out and then like glitched, and it was like deeply unsettling and really well textured. Like it was there were a lot of neat like textures that sort of shifted and changed throughout it.
The
and
whole
it was really
idea of
fascinating.
that is, like in the 70s and 80s, like TV would end at a certain time, and they would play like an American flag kind of fanfare ending to the night of TV. Mm-hmm. And, like, that is really creepy, in context.
And you mentioned that, and there's a lot of, like, the old lady, the evil old lady, says at a certain point that she loves Christmas music. And there's a lot of times where there's, like, almost...
Oh, yeah.
It almost feels like not chiptune, but, like, MIDI renditions of, like, Christmas carols.
On, like, a warbling cassette that falls out of timing.
Yeah, what's it called?
And it's like you can never quite tell, or you can, but it sort of shifts in and out of being non-diegetic and diegetic in a way that I think is really interesting.
Some of
like
it was
it'll start non-diegetically, and then like it'll shift into diegetics. And I thought that was really unsettling. And also, like, this movie is not set at Christmas time. There's no Christmas aesthetic to it at all. So to have, like, these weird, like, MIDI Christmas carols that play intermittently throughout the film is, like, that's really unsettling.
I have a couple of thoughts on that. One, this film has a lot of, like, kind of cool underlying themes about Americana. Mm-hmm. And one here is that like capitalistic element of Christmas being all year. It fuels like our economy like so much, like it's where we're seeing Christmas earlier and earlier throughout the year now, as we're told to buy for Christmas. And that has become like so deeply ingrained in our culture, that we see it in this lady. And I particularly love it because in the score, like you get it kind of as subtly like shifted into some of the mouth sound tracks where like they might be humming like some really fucked up rendition of like Jingle Bells or whatever. But it's always like worked into something else and gone like right when you're catching it, which was nice. Like it never goes on too long. But there's a few times too where I think it sounds like maybe like Christmas dolls or like Christmas toys that make Christmas songs like being circuit bended. So there might have been like some fun circuit bending there going on. I don't know. I like it too because one of the key moments where that's happening is when like the old lady is chasing them down. So like it's almost like one of her themes is like Christmas music coming in. Like it's quite spooky. I liked that about it. And what I will also say about the frenetic editing is what sort of became clear to me by the end. Not clear to me, but something that sort of came to my mind by the end is that we're sort of seeing the whole film like as a recollection from them at this moment, because we have Goonie recollect, and he gains himself back for a brief moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think
we sort of see the beginning of the film again.
What really like hammered it home for me is that like at one of the revelations, towards the end of the film is that Goonie, who is presented as the old lady's son, is not, he's actually one of the people that she and her husband have like kidnapped and are like harvesting meat from, but they lobotomize these people, to keep them alive so they can like slowly cut meat from them over the course of, weeks and months and whatever. And it's like, once you get like the lobotomy aspect of it, it puts so much of the rest of the film like into context for me, because in a lot of ways, like sort of the pacing of this film and like the way that events are presented to you, like it almost feels like you're lobotomized. You know what I mean?
This movie made me feel lobotomized by the end. Yeah,
it's very lethargic in a way. Yeah,
lethargic, but like in the sense that something is. It's like when you're in a nightmare and you are trying to get away from something, but you move extremely slowly.
You are trapped within your own body.
Like, it's like you feel like you're trying to run, but it's like you're like wading through mud or something like that. Like that's what this film feels like in a nutshell. Like it's.
I think it captures it really well.
I think so too. Like for me, it worked really well. I can see. And we noticed like after the film's over that this movie has like an audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes of like 17%, and that makes perfect sense to me. If somebody said that this movie was boring to them, I would have a hard time like trying to argue. I think it just depends on like what you're keyed into and like what you like. It's a super fucking slow movie.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold it against anybody.
I wouldn't hold. Yeah, I also wouldn't. Like if you're bored by this, I get it. It makes sense.
I don't want to watch it again anytime soon. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I think it requires some distance for me, for sure.
If there had been more resolution by the end, maybe I could see myself like wanting to return to it at some point soon.
Well, maybe less bleak resolution.
Yeah, that's the thing. It has a resolution. It's just so fucking nihilistic and bleak.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the surprise celebrity cameo?
Yeah, we absolutely can.
I'll leave that to you guys.
So, multiple times throughout this movie, we see like this locked chest, this like locked box that multiple people like come upon, and they look in it and appear to be horrified, but we don't see what's in it until later. And when we do finally learn what it is, this elderly couple who have fallen on hard times because there was a Sortico outbreak among the wheat, which is like a weird like wheat bacteria that makes livestock go mad and gangrenous and can also affect people if it's cooked into bread and whatnot. They're being driven mad by this disease, and as religious people, they think that this is, God testing them or a sign of the end times. So hence what drives their kidnapping people and, farming them for meat. But we learn that the first person they've done that to is their daughter, who is played by Lena Dunham. in the most bizarre casting choice of maybe any film I've seen this year. She has no lines. Like, she's been lobotomized and she's crazy and she's kept in this locked chest and her arms and legs have been amputated.
Honestly,
so
like,
she just stares dumbly and like drools and dribbles.
I found the casting choice oddly hilarious, and it kind of emphasized the Williamsburg kind of hipster vibe of this movie. And it made it feel more pretentious in a way. I hate
really?
to say it,
okay.
you know, like...
I disagree. I mean, I think the casting choice is fucking weird, but I didn't think that Lena Dunham's presence made the movie more pretentious.
I don't really know who Lena Dunham is. Like, I've heard the name, like, thrown around.
Don't worry about it. She sucks.
Yeah, I've never really been curious to learn more about that sort of thing, but I felt like her presence was horrifying. Like, her character was pretty spooky. Like, not knowing who she was, like,
I think you're honestly better off.
Her character was pretty, like, horrifying and compelling.
I have a hard time taking her seriously in that role because I kind of already, just like as a person, see her as like a drooling, slobbering idiot. So like it almost like the role that she plays in this movie almost felt a little bit too on the nose for me.
She is, honestly, the ending is a fate worse than death. Forcibly having sex with Lena Dunham.
With an armless, legless Lena Dunham. I mean, it's a pretty horrifying ending, regardless of who that is. But yeah, I will say, like, to get slightly off the Lena Dunham subject, I think that conceptually this film is interesting to like have this like sortico bacteria as like the cause of like the slow madness. I think it's cliche at this point to be like, oh, you know, you start eating people meat and it drives you crazy or whatever because of the prions, or you know, like eating human meat drives you crazy, like that. For there to be like a different reason for the madness that like goes hand in hand with the cannibalism.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty unique and cool. I kind of wish they would have escalated the psychedelic editing as the film went along to kind of show that, I don't know, fall into madness of sorts.
Yeah, I think it's tough because like the events of the film are over the course of like 12 hours or so. Like it's one night.
Yeah.
And like when the girlfriend Riley at the beginning is like watching the YouTube video about like Sortico, it's talking about like, you know, peasants in the Middle Ages like not realizing and like making bread out of the tainted wheat, and that like eating it, prolonged consumption, eating it over a long period of time leads to like a slow insanity. And it's like that's what's happened to like these people. We see them like being well into that, but it does kind of take away the opportunity to see our protagonists being driven mad because it's set over then such like a short period of time.
Yeah, exactly.
I do like the little sort of like, I mean, I think the film is heavy-handed in the sense that, like, by showing us that video at the beginning, we kind of know what the crux of the movie is going to be about. But I do like the little touches and stuff. Like, it took me a while to zero in on it, but the old lady's, like, the tips of her fingers are black.
Gangrenous.
Because they're gangrenous.
Yeah. I thought that was great.
I thought that was cool too, because it's like we first really noticed, or I first really noticed it, like when she's cooking for them, like once they've entered the house, and she asks like, "Do you like cardamom?" And she like points at her and is like, "Oh, her fingertips are black." And I thought it was just like seasoning or something for that she'd been cooking. But it's like, no, it's gangrenous from the Sortico.
Around the same time,
those little touches are really nice.
Yeah, there's that. Well, when we're first introduced to Goonie, and they walk into the kitchen thinking that there's only one person in the house,
right? And
in the corner is this like large man, you know, with his face like wrapped, like almost like he has the mumps, you know, like in a circular bandage, and he's catatonic and
sucking on lemon wedges dipped in sugar.
Yeah. And we get a shot it cuts to a photograph on the shelf of him as well, looking like
Yeah.
also kind of confused, which without context is very funny. You know, like it's like you're like he must be like a simpleton. You know, like it's a farmhouse. You know that there's a stereotype.
That is definitely
there.
how he's presented
And-
because he's unresponsive whenever people try to talk to him, and we see him have seizures multiple times.
Yeah, and they talk about him getting kicked in the head by a
by a
horse.
bull. Yeah.
Oh yeah, by a bull. And like at first, you know, you just accept that reasoning.
Yeah.
And it's absurdist comedy.
Yeah, he's kind of like a big goofy like Three Stooges-esque character almost, but like creepy.
Well, he's drinking milk out of a really long surgical tube straw.
Yeah.
like a super long crazy straw, which is pretty goddamn funny and a rad choice. Gets a lot of screen time. The milk. I really like that. There's that scene ends with our couple like sitting at the table and the granny in the doorway, and she says like something like say cheese or something along those lines. She doesn't say that, but it's something like that.
Or she doesn't even say anything. She walks in and just snaps a Polaroid. And the way that was edited was really nice because the second the camera flashes, then it cuts to black.
And
Like the power goes out or something. It doesn't,
Yeah.
but like that's the impression.
and then she leads them down the stairs. And later on, when our protagonists are lobotomized, we get that wonderful cut back and we see their photograph as well sitting next to that. So we now know that Goonie, you know, had the same thing happen to him. And that's why he looked so confused in that shot, is because
Yeah.
she was just taking
Yeah.
a photo of him without saying anything.
That's what I find like so unique and horrifying about this movie conceptually is because like your typical cannibal flicks, something like Texas Chainsaw, it's like you're kidnapped by the hillbillies, you know, they'll torture you but then they'll just kill you and they'll butcher you like a pig for your meat or whatever. But like these people's madness is like they think they're in a time of famine. So they're not killing you, they're lobotomizing you and slowly removing your limbs and like cutting pieces off of you to keep you alive so they have a steady source of food, but also they treat them like they're their children.
Yeah, they'll quote unquote adopt them.
They adopt them, right? And in the Christian tradition and, you know, feed them. And that's why, like, she uses Lena Dunham at the end to rape Sawyer Spielberg is because she says, like, at one point, like, we're still hoping for grandchildren. Bring a little light to this dark world. And, like, that, like, it's fucking horrifying.
Yeah, that's
It's
super bleak and nightmare.
It's truly a fate worse than death, and like that's how the film ends too. It's like they don't get away. Our protagonists end up lobotomized and captured, and we see that Sawyer Spielberg has had his legs amputated. And they both, him and Riley, both have like the same head wrapping that Goonie had because they've been cutting off their cheeks for those tender cuts of meat. Bad time.
Bad time.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
All right. Well, we can go ahead and rate this thing. I think we've pretty much talked about it. I can totally see this not being somebody's thing. It worked really well for me. I thought it was really effective, super atmospheric. I really appreciated the slow pacing and the time to like really wallow around and like drag yourself through the muck and the bad vibes. For me, it's honestly, this is one of my favorites of the year so far. I think it's going to be a strong 4.5 out of 5 for me.
Strong 4 for me. Ditto much of that. Again, I was pretty off put at the beginning. But it all brought me back around. I do also really like that the opening shot of the film is the same person as a young girl, like having to eat the meat. This has clearly been going on for a long time.
Well, I think that's supposed to be Lena Dunham's character, younger.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
yeah.
as a child, like reading from the biblical verses. Pretty heavy stuff and pretty mortifying if you think about it with the context behind it that you don't have when you're first seeing it. So yeah, this movie's all about context, reverse context play, and I like that. So yeah, good 4, good strong 4. What a score.
Yeah, truly, what a score.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I feel like this film really clicks in the third act in a really satisfying way. I do have problems with kind of the pretension and the slow pace of the first two acts and the bulk of the movie. But once it clicks in place, it feels so satisfying, and it's so bleak and just nihilistic and rough. And I really respect that. I really like this film a lot. I'm going to give it a strong 3.5 out of 5, but still recommend it. I think it's not for everyone, obviously, but if you like slow burn movies, or if you like, Hills Have Eyes or Texas Chainsaw, this is an interesting kind of deconstruction of those type of movies.
It's just bleak as shit, so don't, make sure you have your
Texas
evening
Chainsaw
set
is
aside
also
for
bleak as shit.
It's
in
true.
its own way.
Yeah. I would agree. Like, this is a big recommendation for me, but with the caveat, like, if you're gonna watch this movie, be prepared to sit down and have a bad time for a little under 2 hours. To be uncomfortable for a little under 2 hours. But if you like that, then you should enjoy it. And it'll give Honeydew a average of 4 out of 5 pods. Next week, incidentally, it's my pick again. So it will be a sort of unofficial second part of our mid-year catch-up, because I'm going to be choosing another new movie, a movie that I'm particularly excited about, having seen the trailer and thought that it would hopefully deserve its own episode. So next week, we're going to be talking about the new Ben Wheatley film, In the Earth. Looks spooky and sort of cosmic horror-y, so I'm pretty excited.
I'm super curious about it. Ben Wheatley is a director that I'm very hit or miss with so far of the films I've seen. I loved Sightseers. I really didn't like High Rise.
I wasn't a huge fan
I
of
liked
High Rise
Free
either.
Fall quite a bit. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, the trailer looks great, so I'm hoping it lives up to the hype. So tune back in next week to hear our thoughts on In the Earth. Now, lest we forget...
The shelf.
The shelf.
It calls
The shelf
to me.
rattles.
The shelf calls to me. This week, Pod People is brought to you by, holy shit, it's a box full of hornets. Ah, fuck!
All right, well, that'll bring us to the end of this week's episode. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is to leave us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. But you can also support us by becoming a subscriber on our Patreon at patreon.com/podpeoplepod. We've got 3 different support tiers that you can join. If you join the highest tier, the honorary Podboy tier, you will be able to recommend movies for us to review on the show.
We'll be so deeply moved, we'll cry some support tears.
Oh, yeah. There we go. You can also follow us on Twitter and at letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those episodes. I forgot last week, and I almost forgot this week, to give a shout out to our honorary pod boys, Sam Simon and Sarah Morris. And I'll take this opportunity to note that pod boy is a gender neutral title. So you can be a pod boy whatever your gender. So we thank Sam and Sarah. And if you want to join their ranks, once again, that's patreon.com/podpeoplepod. You can follow me on Twitter at SomeSpookySnake.
I'm on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
And I'm occasionally tweeting for Light Arc Studios. We put out more progress on It Stares Back. Been tweeting some cool art for Screenshot Saturday lately. You should go check out our Twitter. And you can also check out the game on Steam and join our Discord via our website, lightarcstudio.com. Yeah, look at my art on ArtStation, and stay tuned for more cool Dread games from Dread XP, because I also work for them. The Spookware is coming soonish, and it's going to be really good. So be excited. Or not, live your dreams.
Well, we thank you to listening to our mid-year catch-up. We thank you for sticking with us through this first half of the year. And, overall, I think there's been a lot of good stuff this year so far. Hopefully the second half of the year will be as strong. And come back next week to see what is chilling deep down in the earth.